What's going on, guys? And in this episode of Corolla Customs, we are gonna get our bottom end assembled, or somewhat. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Corolla Customs. I'm Ryan, for those of you who don't know, and on today's episode we are gonna get some of the bottom end assembles. We're gonna get the camshaft, well, that's kind of mid-engine, but anyway, camshaft, crankshaft, main bearings, pistons, front cover. I'm going to try to get the oil pan on for you guys today, and the rear cover, but let's see how things go. And with that being said, let's just jump right into the video. After unwrapping, we carefully inspect our camshaft to make sure that there aren't any scratches on the lobes. Any damage to the lobes can lead to a loss of horsepower and fuel economy, as well as other issues. Before installing our cam, I first clean it to remove any debris. Then I use assembly lube. Assembly lube is designed to be used as a lubricant to prevent metal-to-metal contact. Carefully install your camshaft and be sure not to hit your lobes along the engine block. Now we are ready to install our main bearings. In order to do so, you must first clean each port, and then apply some assembly lube. Then we install each of our main bearings, followed by some assembly lube. And now we can lay down our crank. Next, we move on to our bearing caps. I apply some assembly lube and then I install each bearing on the main caps. Make sure not to add oil on the bearings. We do this to ensure a proper reading on our plasti gauge. Before moving on with the assembly, we have to check our main bearing clearance using plasti gauge. What is plasti gauge? Plasti gauge is a tool used for measuring bearing clearances. In order to do this, you need to break off a piece of your plasti gauge and set it on the clean surface of the crank where the main bearings lie. Then place each bearing cap, torque each bolt in order to their specifications, and finally loosen the caps and measure your readings. After all is said and done, we must clean off the plasti gauge. Then we apply assembly lube. Now we must install our main cap bearings and torque everything to spec. Here we are checking the crankshaft end play. To know your specific play or torque sequence, you can find it online. Now we install our side cap bolts and torque them to 18 foot-pounds. Next, we move on to cleaning our cylinders. We spray the walls with brake cleaner and wipe dry. Then we apply a thin coat of oil. So here I'm going to show you one of the pistons. There is a certain way that you have to put this piston in. So if you look on your piston, there'll either be a mark or a dot or an arrow. So for my specific piston, there's an arrow right here. I'm not sure if you can really see it. There's an arrow right there, meaning this goes towards the timing chain. So that's the front. It's going to go towards the front of the engine. So I'm going to be placing it in towards the front of my engine, towards the timing chain. Another key note that you want to also keep in mind is these piston rings. You do not want them to line up like this. You don't want them to line up like this. If you do that, they will consume oil. Your truck will consume oil. Your car will consume oil. Whatever you're working on, it's going to consume oil, and a lot. So what you want to do is basically, it doesn't matter which of the rings, but either the top or bottom, you want it 180 degrees away from each other. So I would take the top and spin it all the way to the back. So now that that's to the back, you see the front one has a gap and the back one has the gap. Now you also have to do the same thing for the bottom. So you don't want any of those gaps to line up. All the gaps have to be misplaced around, so it makes a seal quick enough for the engine to combust and let the compression, you know, go, whatever it is. So basically, if you follow what I'm saying, all the gaps cannot line up. So right here, if you look, I have a gap right there, and then no gap, no gap, no gap, no gap. Then I'm gonna turn around my piston till I think I got it right now. So there should be no gaps lining up. Let's see here. Let's do the bottom ring first. There's a little gap there, right here, and the rest has no gap. No gap, no gap, no gap, no gap. Keep turning for the center ring. No gap, gap, no gap, no gap, no gap. Turn to for the top. No gap, no gap, gap, no gap, no gap. Second ring. No gap, no gap, no gap. Gap, no gap. Gap, no gap, no gap, no gap, no gap. All right, cool. So there's no more gaps. Now we're gonna compress it and put our piston in. Before installing our pistons, we apply assembly lube and install our rod bearing. Then we add some assembly lube to that as well. We make sure our rod is facing the right way, and we carefully install our pistons. Do not scratch your cylinder wall. After compressing our piston rings, we use the handle of a mallet to install our pistons. Before completely installing our rod bearings, we have to check the clearance using the plasti gauge. I'm installing my brand new camshaft retainer plate. This should be replaced when we're building your motor. This is what I like to call smush gaskets. I believe smush gaskets are a one-time use. Now I torque it down to 18 foot-pounds. Next, I clean this filthy sludged up timing gear. Before reusing this gear, I made sure the teeth were awesome. We just have to brush them. Let's install our cam gear. We must line up the keyway from the cam to the gear. Alright guys, so whenever you have a brand new chain, you don't want this to go on dry. You want to dump it in some oil and let it soak. So that's what we're going to do right now. This is an AC Delco one, factory OEM, so let's get started on that. Install your chain on the cam gear and center it on the crank sprocket. Before installing your chain, you must align your crank at the 12 and line the cam at the 6 position. The angle of the camera makes it look off, but I took my time and made sure it was spot on.